The hum of the microwave filled the kitchen, the only ordinary sound in a day that was about to collapse. I had just come home from a 12-hour shift at Denver Memorial, my scrub still clinging to the exhaustion of a night filled with alarms and code blues. All I wanted was to reheat some chicken tenders, throw frozen vegetables on a plate, and feed Nina before collapsing into bed myself. But before the timer even hit 2 minutes, Dad's voice drifted in from the dining room, measured calm, the kind of calm that always meant trouble. Before we dive into true revenge stories, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hearing from people around the world makes these stories even more powerful and reminds us how connected we all are. "Nora, could you come in here?" The tone froze me more than the words. My compression socks scraped softly against the hardwood as I obeyed, dreading what I'd find. The dining room looked staged like a courtroom in miniature. Mom at one end of the table, Dad at the other. Papers spread neatly between them. Nina sat in her wheelchair at the far side, her hands folded, eyes cast down. The empty chair was mine, the defendant's seat. "Sit," Dad ordered. "No greeting." "No." "How was your shift, sweetheart?" "Just the command." I lowered myself onto the chair stomach, already sinking. "What's going on?" Dad slid a thick stack of papers toward me, his gold signet ring flashing in the overhead light. "Your mother and I are getting older. We need to formalize the arrangements for Nina's care." My eyes dropped to the first page. Bold letters screamed across the top, "Caregiver Agreement." Further down, highlighted in yellow, "Responsible party, Nora Ann Reed." Confusion tangled with dread. "I don't understand." "It's simple," Mom said, voice soft but edged with steel. "You'll cash out your 401k to create a care fund for Nina. Then you'll contribute $2,000 every month for her ongoing expenses." The room tilted. $2,000. Every month I don't make that kind of money. "You make $70,000 a year," Dad countered smoothly, fingers steepled like a corporate negotiator. "That's over $4,000 a month. We're only asking for half. But my rent, my student loans—" "Don't hide behind loans." Mom snapped, the softness evaporating. "You've got $60,000 in your retirement account. After taxes, you'll still have $40,000, enough to start the fund." My hands trembled against the wood-grain table. I wanted to scream that no financial planner in America would recommend cashing out retirement early, that penalties would eat me alive, that this wasn't just reckless, it was manipulative. But the words jammed in my throat. "This seems very sudden." "Nothing sudden about it," Dad said flatly. "You've been responsible for your sister since the accident. Now we're simply putting it in writing." Responsible. That word had shackled me since I was 16. It was the label they hung around my neck the night Nina's world and mine changed forever. Dad pushed a pen across the table. "Sign, today, we'll file tomorrow." I picked it up, the metal cold against my fingers. For a heartbeat, I saw myself at 16 sitting on Nina's hospital bed, braiding her hair while machines beeped around us. "I'll always take care of you," I had whispered. "This is all my fault, but I'll fix it." Now, 11 years later, they wanted that teenage promise turned into a lifetime contract. Why is this all on me? The question escaped as barely more than a whisper. "We're all family." Dad's jaw clenched. "Because you're the reason she's in that wheelchair." The knife twisted again, just as it had every day for more than a decade. Yet beneath the pain, something else stirred, something I hadn't felt in years. Doubt. "I need time to think." My voice surprised even me with its steadiness. "There's nothing to think about," Dad barked. "Sign now," Mom threatened, "or we'll tell everyone at the hospital you're abandoning your responsibility. Your supervisor, your church. Everyone will know the saint they admire is nothing but a fraud." The silence pressed down like lead. They knew exactly where to aim my reputation, my career, my fragile place in a community that respected me only because they believed the lie. I hovered the pen above the line, the weight of 11 years trembling in my wrist. Then slowly, deliberately, I set it down. "I'll talk to you tomorrow." Dad's eyes narrowed. Mom's lips thinned. Nina stayed silent, her wheelchair a barrier between us all. I stood, legs shaky but unbroken, and walked away. In my bedroom, I locked the door back, sliding down the wall. My phone slipped into my hands. Contacts blurred through tears until one name steadied me: Evelyn Carter. We hadn't spoken in years, but right now she was the only person who could save me. The phone rang 3 times. Then, Nora. It's been forever. Are you okay? Her voice was warm, concerned, alive with the promise that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't trapped alone anymore. The bedroom walls felt like they were closing in, but Evelyn's voice on the other end of the phone pulled in air I hadn't breathed in years. It's been forever, Nora. What happened? You sound... She paused, searching for the word cornered. Cornered didn't begin to cover it. I spilled everything in a torrent. The papers spread like a trap across the dining table. Dad's steepled fingers, Mom's threats to ruin me at work and church, the $2,000 monthly demand, the forced retirement cash out. By the time I finished, my throat was raw, and tears soaked the neckline of my scrub top. They want everything I have, Evelyn. My savings, my paycheck, even my future. Her tone shifted instantly into the lawyer's cadence I remembered from college mock debates. Slow down. Start with the basics. Who drafted the agreement? Some attorney Dad knows. He wouldn't say who. Did you sign? No. I almost did. But something stopped me. Good. Don't. Under duress contracts are challengeable, but better not to put your name on anything. Her confidence steadied me like a railing on a swaying bridge. Evelyn, they said I owe this because I'm the reason Nina's paralyzed, that it was my responsibility to walk her to the bus stop, that she tried to catch it, and a delivery truck. The old script stuck in my throat, the one I'd repeated to myself in every sleepless night. Silence hummed on the line for a beat too long. Then Evelyn asked the question that cracked the world open. Nora, have you ever actually seen the police report from Nina's accident? The question landed like a foreign language. No. I was 16. They handled everything. I was too broken. They told me what happened, and I believed them. After 11 years, you've never requested the report yourself. The shame in my answer scorched my cheeks even though she couldn't see me. No. If you're still watching, comment 1, so I know you're still with me. Evelyn's sigh carried both empathy and urgency. Listen to me. In every case I've worked, the first rule is verify. Official reports, hospital records, insurance filings. Don't just take people's words, even family. Especially family when money is involved. Her words clanged like a bell in my chest. For the first time it occurred to me that the foundation of my guilt, the bus stop story, had never been mine to check. But if it's true, I whispered, if I really am the reason, then you'd at least be dealing with facts, not threats, not manipulation. Facts. The quiet between us deepened. The hum of the microwave in the other room, the muted thump of Dad's voice through the walls, it all blurred into a haze. What if it wasn't my fault at all? The words trembled out of me, fragile but alive like a newborn bird. Then Nora Evelyn said firmly, "You've sacrificed 11 years for a lie." Her certainty scared me more than my parents' threats. Because what if she was right? What if my whole life, the double shifts, the missed dates, the loans I could barely touch, wasn't atonement, but theft? "Can you get the report?" I asked. "I can," she said. "Give me a day." For the first time that night, my lungs filled all the way. 3 days later, I sat hunched over a chipped ceramic mug in a downtown coffee shop. Steam curled upward, blurring my reflection in the window. I hadn't returned to my parents' house except to sleep behind a locked door. Their threats echoed in my head, but so did Evelyn's promise facts over fear. When she arrived, Evelyn didn't look like the college friend I remembered. Gone were the wild curls and torn jeans. In their place, a tailored charcoal suit, sleek ponytail, eyes sharp as glass. She dropped her briefcase onto the table with a thud. "You look terrible," she said bluntly. I barked a laugh that sounded more like a cough. 12-hour shifts plus avoiding my parents will do that. She flipped open her case, unclipped a manila folder, and slid it toward me. I found the police report. The folder sat like a loaded weapon between us. My fingers hovered above the cardboard edge, too scared to touch it. "How bad is it?" Evelyn didn't answer. She turned the folder around, opened it, and pointed. "Read." Black letters swam on the page. "Location of accident Westridge Road, 3.8 miles from our neighborhood. Time, 3:42 p.m. Vehicle involved, 1998 Honda motorcycle. Driver Jason Miller, age 17. Passenger, Nina Reed, age 14. I blinked, convinced fatigue had scrambled the words. This can't be right. They told me she missed the bus, that she tried to catch it at the next stop. Keep reading. My eyes snagged on this witness statement, female passenger laughing arms wrapped around driver's waist. Motorcycle attempted to beat yellow light. Delivery truck had green signal. My throat closed. They lied. All of it. They lied. Evelyn's hand covered mine, grounding me. Nora, they lied about everything. The room tilted. 11 years of guilt built on a story that had never existed. The manila folder sat heavy between us edges, sharp against the wooden coffee shop table. My hands trembled as I flipped the first page, scanning the black type that would either confirm a decade of guilt or unravel it completely. Location of accident Westridge Road, 3.8 miles from the Reed residence. My heart stuttered. That was nowhere near the bus stop. Vehicle involved, 1998 Honda motorcycle. Driver Jason Miller, age 17. Passenger Nina Reed, age 14. My breath hitched, the words smearing as if the ink itself rejected my memory. Motorcycle Jason Miller. I remembered him a basketball player 2 years older than Nina, the boy my parents had forbidden her from seeing. This can't be right, I whispered, shoving the page back. They told me she missed the bus, that she tried to cross the street. Keep reading. Evelyn urged, her voice calm but firm. I forced my eyes down. Witness statement. Female passenger laughing arms wrapped around driver's waist. Motorcycle attempted to beat yellow light. Delivery truck had green signal. The cafe walls closed in. For 11 years I had carried the image of Nina running desperate across an intersection because I had failed to walk her to the bus stop. But here it was plain unshakable. She hadn't even gone near the bus. She'd chosen to ride with Jason, breaking every rule our parents had set. The air thickened heavy with the weight of betrayal. They lied. They lied about everything. Evelyn's hand covered mine. Yes, and they started the lie from day one. I spoke with a nurse who was in the trauma room. Your father was already spinning the story before Nina was even out of surgery. I pressed my palms against my eyes, but the images wouldn't stop. 16-year-old me sobbing in the hospital hallway. Dad's hand heavy on my shoulder. You were supposed to walk her. This is on you. Mom's voice echoing, feed the cats instead of your sister. Shame will follow you forever. Shame that had dictated every choice, night classes, instead of campus life, nursing, instead of engineering, paycheck after paycheck funneled home because I thought I owed a debt. My stomach lurched. I barely made it to the cafe restroom before vomiting into the sink. When I looked up, my reflection was hollow-eyed, pale, like a ghost born of other people's lies. Back at the table, Evelyn had ordered tea, her eyes scanning me for fractures. Nora, listen. This isn't just about misplaced guilt. There are financial patterns here. Your grandmother left you $20,000. 3 months after the accident, your parents used it for medical costs. But the insurance covered most of Nina's treatment. They diverted the money. I sank into the booth, every cell vibrating with disbelief. They stole my inheritance, and they made me believe I owed them more. Evelyn nodded. They also pressured you into nursing. You would have doubled your income as an engineer. That wasn't about what made sense for you. It was about maximizing what you could funnel into Nina's care fund, or their mortgage, or their credit cards. The pieces fell together like jagged glass. My parents at every church fundraiser, my mother crying on cue, my father parading my sacrifices as proof of our family's virtue. All while hiding that the truth was written in plain ink 3.8 miles away. They made me believe I destroyed her life, I said, voice raw. And all this time she knew. Nina knew. She was 14, Evelyn said softly. Not a child, but not an adult either. She stayed quiet, maybe out of fear. But silence doesn't erase complicity. I clenched the report until the edges dug into my palms. 11 years of lost dreams, stolen opportunities, sleepless nights, all because I never demanded the facts. Evelyn's eyes locked on mine. This is the beginning, Nora. We have the truth now. Next, we gather witnesses: Jason, your Aunt Laura, anyone who overheard the lies. The statute of limitations means they can't force you legally, but we need to prepare because they'll fight to protect their image. Her words steadied me, but anger burned hotter than fear. I looked down at the police seal stamped on the final page. For the first time in more than a decade, I felt something like clarity. I wasn't the guilty one. I was the scapegoat. And now I had proof. The police report still burned in my hands when Evelyn leaned closer, her voice lowering as if the truth itself might shatter the coffee shop windows. Nora, lies this big never exist in a vacuum. There's always a motive. With your parents, it was money, money, and control. Her words snapped open memories I had buried. 3 months after the accident, Dad stood in Nina's hospital room holding a stack of papers. My eyes were swollen from crying, my hands trembling. "Sign this," he had said. "It's for Nina's medical care." I scrawled my name without reading, believing I was saving my sister. Later I learned it was a withdrawal from Grandma's will, $20,000, meant for me gone before I even understood what estate meant. That money, Evelyn confirmed tapping the folder, wasn't spent on surgeries or therapies. Insurance covered nearly everything. It disappeared into household bills and debt. They saw your guilt as a resource to mine. The realization gutted me. Grandma had always said that nest egg will help you fly. Instead, it had been clipped from my wings before I even left the ground. But it wasn't just the money. It was every decision that followed. Sophomore year, I'd told Mom I wanted to study engineering. Numbers thrilled me. Blueprints made sense in a way people didn't. She had smiled, then shaken her head. Engineering is demanding. Nursing is practical. You'll always have a job and you'll know how to care for Nina. At the time, I believed she was being wise. Now I saw the chains in her words. Nursing meant long shifts, burnout wages, and an identity tied to caretaking. It meant I'd never leave. Evelyn slid another document across the table. "Here's a projection. If you had gone into engineering, your starting salary would have doubled what you earn now. Over 11 years, that's a 6-figure loss. Money they calculated would have been harder to siphon if you lived your own life." My throat tightened. They sabotaged my future. On purpose. Because guilt gave them leverage, she said evenly. If you believed you owed a debt, you'd work harder, live smaller hand over whatever they asked. That's coercive control, Nora. Not love. Coercive control. The phrase echoed like a diagnosis explaining every symptom of my adult life. The endless double shifts. The guilt whenever I thought of moving out. The way Dad would drop my so-called irresponsibility into every argument. Remember the bus stop. Remember the accident. Control disguised as moral duty. I thought of the church fundraisers, Mom crying in front of the congregation, Dad thanking the generosity that eased Nora's burden. They'd turned my life into a performance piece, my guilt into a collection plate. And the church had applauded blind to the fact that less than half of the donations went to Nina's care. They didn't just steal money. I said the words tasting like rust. They stole my choices. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. And that's why the police report matters. It breaks the foundation of their entire manipulation. Without your guilt, they lose their leverage. They can't force you into contracts, can't parade you as the dutiful sister. The moment you reject that narrative, the whole structure crumbles. Anger surged hot through my veins, hotter than the coffee cooling between us. For the first time, I saw my parents not as grieving guardians, but as architects of a cage. They hadn't just lied about a bus stop. They had built an entire prison from shame and expectation, then locked me inside it. They told me I owed them my life, I whispered. But all along they were cashing in on it. Yes, Evelyn said softly, and now we expose it. I leaned back, breath shaky but steadying. The truth was ugly, but it was mine at last. And I realized something else too. If money and control were their motives, then stripping away both would be my freedom. The police report had cracked the foundation, but Evelyn reminded me that one document alone wouldn't withstand the storm my parents would unleash. "They've had 11 years to polish their story," she said, spreading papers across her office desk. If we confront them with only this report, they'll twist it, question it, bury it under community sympathy. We need a full case, witnesses, documents, a timeline that leaves no space for doubt. The word case made my stomach tighten. It sounded less like family drama and more like a criminal proceeding. But then again, what they had done was criminal. Where do we start? I asked. Evelyn tapped the list she'd drawn in blue ink. First, Jason Miller. Just hearing his name felt like a punch to the chest. Jason, the boy with the crooked smile who used to wave at us during basketball games. Jason, the secret my sister had clung to so tightly that she let me drown in guilt rather than admit the truth. He was driving the motorcycle, Evelyn said. He's a critical witness. He can confirm the threats your parents made and that Nina skipped the bus to be with him. I swallowed hard. What if he refuses? Then we subpoena. But I have a feeling guilt has been eating him alive too. That night, I sat at my kitchen table laptop, open fingers hovering over the search bar. It didn't take long to find him, Jason Miller, now a high school basketball coach. His profile picture showed him in a polo shirt, smiling beside his wife and 2 children. Ordinary, safe, as if the accident had never happened. I typed a message with shaking hands. Were you with Nina the day of her accident? The reply came faster than my heartbeat. A local number appeared on my screen. When I answered, his voice was deeper, steadier, but laced with regret. I've been waiting 11 years for this call, Jason said. Your parents made me swear never to tell. They said if I did, I'd be charged with endangering a minor. I was 17, terrified. I went along with their story. But it's eaten me alive. The dam inside me cracked. So it's true. Nina wasn't at the bus stop. She was with you. Yes. She begged me not to tell anyone. She wasn't even wearing a helmet, said it would mess up her hair for a party. I'll sign whatever you need. I'll make a sworn statement. When I hung up, Evelyn's eyes shone with grim satisfaction. That's witness number 1. 2 days later, we drove to the modest brick house of my Aunt Laura Mom's youngest sister. She opened the door with wary eyes, but when she saw me, her face softened into guilt. I've been expecting this, she said quietly, leading us into her living room. Evelyn got straight to the point. Laura, did you overhear your sister and brother-in-law the day of the accident? Her hands twisted in her lap. Yes, I was carrying flowers into Nina's hospital room when I heard them in the hallway. Diane said, don't let anyone know she was with that boy. Martin answered, Nora's always been responsible. She'll accept it was her fault. The words hit me like a physical blow. You heard them plan it, and you didn't say anything. Tears welled in her eyes. I was weak, Nora. I told myself it wasn't my place, but I've carried the shame every day since. If you need my testimony, you have it. Evelyn leaned forward. A signed statement, sworn and notarized. It could change everything. Laura nodded quickly. I'll do it. I should have spoken years ago. That night, Evelyn and I stood before a whiteboard in her office. She had mapped out 11 years of manipulation with sticky notes and arrows, inheritance, stolen college, delayed career, redirected paychecks, siphoned community fundraisers, exploited. Jason's testimony. Laura's overheard conversation, the police report, each pinned to the board like weapons ready for battle. For the first time, the chaos of my life looked like evidence. I stepped back, studying the board as if it belonged to a patient file. It's not just guilt anymore, I murmured. It's fraud. Systematic fraud. Evelyn nodded. And once we finish building this, you'll have more than the truth. You'll have power. They can't bury you in shame if the evidence stands taller than their lies. The thought steadied me. For 11 years, they had written the story of my life. Now, for the first time, I was holding the pen. Just when the evidence board in Evelyn's office made me feel stronger than I had in years, my parents struck back. It was a Tuesday morning when the hospital's HR office called. The tone in the secretary's voice was clipped formal. Miss Reed, we need you in human resources immediately. It concerns allegations about your professional conduct. My stomach plunged. I walked across the hospital lobby in a daze, blue scrubs rustling badge cold against my chest. When I entered the conference room, my supervisor, Janet, sat stiff-backed at the head of the table. Beside her were 2 members of hospital security. A folder lay in front of them like a verdict waiting to be read. Janet's eyes were cool but not unkind. "Nora, we've received a tip through our ethics hotline. The caller alleged you've been stealing prescription medications to sell for personal profit." For a moment I couldn't breathe. That's insane. Security slid the folder open. "We've pulled your medication access logs for the last 12 months. The printouts were thick, time-stamped down to the second every medication I had ever dispensed to a patient. Nurses live by those logs. They're airtight." Still, my hands shook as I flipped through them, fearing some mistake I didn't remember making. Janet studied me carefully. "Do you know who might have made such an accusation?" The image of my father's hard eyes came instantly. "We'll tell everyone you're abandoning your duty." Now they had escalated, dragging my career into their war. "I believe it was my parents," I said quietly. "They're retaliating because I refused to sign a fraudulent caregiving contract." Security exchanged skeptical glances, but Evelyn, who had insisted on coming, spoke up with calm authority. "We anticipated this. Miss Reed's parents have a documented history of manipulation and coercion. If you review the logs, you'll see every medication reconciled properly. There is no missing inventory. For 30 excruciating minutes, we sat while security cross-checked the access reports against pharmacy counts and patient charts. My pulse hammered in my ears, each click of the keyboard like a gavel. Finally, Janet closed the file. "These allegations have no merit. Your dispensing record is spotless. We will classify the report as malicious and close the case." Relief hit so hard my shoulders slumped. But it wasn't victory. It was a warning. My parents were willing to burn my reputation, my livelihood, anything to keep their lie alive. In the parking lot afterward, Evelyn turned to me. "That was desperate. They hoped fear would make you fold. But desperation means they know we're closing in." I gripped the steering wheel of my car, knuckles white. If they're willing to accuse me of drug theft, what's next? How far will they go as far as they think they can? That's why we need airtight evidence before we confront them publicly. No more half measures. That night, back in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling, sleep impossible. The thoughts circled endlessly. They weren't just trying to shame me anymore, they were trying to destroy me. And still part of me wanted to believe they were acting out of fear, not cruelty. But fear doesn't forge signatures. Fear doesn't invent bus stop stories. Fear doesn't call anonymous hotlines with fabricated crimes. This wasn't just about Nina's accident anymore. It was about parents willing to weaponize every system around them, church, hospital, even the law, to keep control. I opened my laptop and added a new sticky note to the digital timeline Evelyn kept, updated 2025. Parents file false allegation of drug theft. Outcome disproven. Pattern escalation of coercion. The note glowed on the screen, the latest tile in a mosaic of manipulation. Looking at it, the fear in my chest hardened into something sharper. Resolve. "They want to play dirty," I whispered into the empty room. "Fine." Then I stopped playing nice. 3 nights after the hospital scare, Marcus arrived at Evelyn's office carrying a thick manila folder. He dropped it onto the mahogany table with a thud that made my stomach flip. "I think I just found something big," he said, sliding the folder toward me. Inside were photocopies of a mortgage application from 6 months earlier, pages of fine print bank seals and signatures. My name appeared on the borrower line, neat and practiced. Too practiced. "That's not mine," I whispered, tracing the ink. "I never signed this." Marcus tapped the page. "The bank's forensic examiner confirmed it. The pressure points, the angle of the strokes, they don't match your real signature. Whoever forged this was trying to mimic your style, but the analysis caught the differences." My pulse roared in my ears. "They took out a second mortgage, using my name." Evelyn leaned forward, eyes hard. "Yes. And that moves us out of family drama and into criminal territory. Forgery, fraud, possibly even identity theft. This isn't about guilt anymore, Nora. It's about crimes punishable by law." I felt the blood drain from my face. For years I'd believed my parents' worst weapon was emotional manipulation. But this was paper-ink legal documents that could chain me to debts I never agreed to. What if the bank comes after me for repayment? My voice shook. "They won't," Evelyn said firmly. "With the examiner's report, we can prove you never signed." I've already filed for a restraining order to stop them from accessing any of your finances until this is resolved. I gripped the edges of the folder, my knuckles white. Memories flooded back, Dad pushing papers in front of me at the hospital, Mom insisting just sign here for Nina's sake. Back then I'd been too young, too broken to question. But now they hadn't even bothered asking. They'd simply taken my name and bent it to their will. "How do people do this to their own daughter?" I whispered. Marcus's voice was steady, professional. Desperation. "Their house is underwater, credit card debt piling up, medical bills. They saw you as the easiest lifeline. But this isn't survival, it's theft. And if we present this correctly, it's the nail in the coffin of their credibility." Evelyn pinned the forged document to our evidence board right under the sticky notes that mapped 11 years of manipulation. Seeing my name scrawled in false ink, attached to a debt I never chose, sent a surge of cold rage through me. "This isn't just fraud," I said slowly. "It's a confession. They proved exactly what they think of me, not a daughter, but a signature to exploit." Evelyn nodded. "And now we use it. The forgery strengthens every other claim about the inheritance, the insurance money, the donations. It shows a pattern of deception that no court, no community can ignore. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel weak. I felt dangerous." That night, lying awake in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling and thought about everything they had taken: Grandma's legacy, my education, my salary, my reputation. And now, my name itself. But the more I thought about it, the clearer my path became. They had spent years constructing a story where I was the villain, the careless sister who ruined Nina's life. Now I held the documents that proved who the real villains were. In the silence, I whispered a vow. "No more. You wanted me to carry your lies, but I'll carry the truth instead, and the truth will bury your lies." The knock on my apartment door came on a Sunday evening. When I opened it, Uncle Robert stood there, hat in hand, his expression tight. "Your parents want you at the house tomorrow," he said. "Family matter. Everyone will be there. Everyone." My pulse quickened. This wasn't just another ambush, it was a tribunal. They were gathering allies, stacking the jury before I could even speak. Evelyn, calm as ever, adjusted her glasses when I told her. "Good. Let them gather their army. We'll bring ours." The next evening, I walked into the old dining room and froze. The table was ringed with extra chairs like a makeshift courtroom. My parents sat at the head papers, neatly stacked, eyes sharp with triumph. On one side, Uncle Robert, Aunt Grace, 2 church elders, and Pastor Miller with his Bible placed squarely before him. At the far end, a silver-haired attorney shuffled documents. And of course, Nina's silent hands folded in her lap, the image of dutiful suffering. Dad rose with practiced sincerity. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. This is difficult, but family matters require family solutions." Mom handed out stapled packets. "For those who don't know, Nora has been responsible for Nina's care since the accident. Recently, she has decided to abandon that responsibility." Murmurs rippled. Aunt Grace shot me a look of disappointment. Uncle Robert shook his head. Pastor Miller frowned gravely. "Perhaps Christian mediation is in order." The attorney slid a contract toward me. "A simple caregiver agreement. Once signed, we can ensure Nina's needs are met." Every eye in the room turned to me. The weight of judgment pressed like a noose. This was exactly their plan: public shame, moral pressure, the crushing burden of family expectation. I forced my hands to stay steady on the table. "Before anyone signs anything, I'd like to introduce someone." On cue, the doorbell rang. Mom's eyes narrowed. "Who could that be?" "My attorney," I said, "and a journalist who has been helping me investigate what really happened 11 years ago." Gasps fluttered around the room as Evelyn entered, sharp in her charcoal suit, followed by Marcus with his recorder visible at his side. Behind them came Aunt Laura, her face pale but determined. Dad's composure cracked. "This is a private family matter." "No," I said, my voice firm. "It stopped being private when you invited the church elders and your lawyer. If you want an audience, then you'll hear the truth." Evelyn introduced herself with professional poise. "I represent Nora Reed. I understand you've been discussing a caregiving agreement under false pretenses. We have documentation proving the narrative you've spread is not only inaccurate, but fraudulent." Marcus set his recorder on the table, red light blinking. "For the record, Martin and Diane Reed, I'm investigating misuse of family funds tied to church donations and fraudulent financial documents." Shock rippled again. Pastor Miller's brow furrowed. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Mom's face flushed crimson. "How dare you bring strangers into our home?" I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Strangers? For 11 years you made me believe I destroyed my sister's life. You took my inheritance, my college fund, half my paycheck, then called it my duty. If this family wanted honesty, maybe you should have started there." Aunt Laura stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. "I was at the hospital that day. I overheard Diane telling Martin, 'Don't let anyone know she was with that boy. We'll say Nora was supposed to walk her to the bus.' And Martin replied, 'Nora will accept it. She always does.'" Gasps again, sharper this time. I turned to the elders, then to Pastor Miller. "They lied to all of you from the very first day." For the first time, Nina's eyes lifted from her lap. Tears trembled on her lashes. But she said nothing yet. The room felt split down the middle, my parents clinging to their story, the weight of evidence pressing against them. The tribunal they had arranged to shame me had just become their trial, and I was ready for the verdict. The dining room had gone silent after Aunt Laura's confession, the kind of silence that presses against the walls and makes every breath sound guilty. Dad's hand twitched around his pen. Mom's lips thinned to a knife's edge. They had invited this audience to crush me, but now the floor was tilting under their chairs. Evelyn broke the silence first. Calm, professional. "We've brought documents for everyone present. I think it's important that the truth be reviewed by more than just Nora." She opened her briefcase and began handing out manila folders, one to each elder, to Uncle Robert, to Aunt Grace, even to Pastor Miller. Marcus, steady with his recorder, captured every shuffle of paper, every gasp as the pages turned. Inside each folder was the police report, Westridge Road, 3.8 miles from home. Motorcycle. Driver Jason Miller. Passenger Nina Reed. Witnesses. Statements. Facts that could no longer be bent by guilt. Uncle Robert's face drained of color as he read. Aunt Grace murmured, This says nothing about a bus stop." Pastor Miller adjusted his glasses, brows knitting as he scanned the bold black letters. Finally he looked up, his voice grave. "Martin, Diane, is this true?" For once my father had no ready words. He opened his mouth, closed it again. "My mother tried to recover. We were protecting Nina. A teenage girl on a motorcycle with a boy. It would have destroyed her reputation in the community." I slammed my palm on the table. "So you destroyed mine instead. You made me the scapegoat. For 11 years I carried guilt that never belonged to me." The elders shifted uncomfortably, whispers rippling. One muttered, "If they lied about the accident." Evelyn placed a second stack of papers on the table. "And here are financial records. Less than 40% of Nora's contributions were used for Nina's actual care. The rest mortgage payments, a fishing boat, a Florida timeshare." A collective murmur of outrage rose. Elder Peterson's face turned crimson. The church fund was meant for medical needs, not personal luxuries. "We will audit every cent." Marcus leaned forward, voice crisp. "And this," he slid a photograph across the table, "is Nina taken the morning of the accident. On Jason Miller's motorcycle." Gasps burst from the room. The photo was grainy, but unmistakable. Nina laughing, hair whipping in the wind, arms tight around Jason's waist. All eyes turned to her now. For the first time she couldn't hide behind folded hands. Tears welled, spilling over as she gripped her wheelchair wheels. Her voice cracked, barely audible. "I skipped the bus. I begged Jason not to tell. I was 14 and scared. Mom and Dad said Nora would take the blame, that she was strong enough. I stayed quiet. For 11 years I stayed quiet. The dam broke. Sobs shook her frame, words tumbling between gasps. I let you carry it all, Nora. The shame, the money, everything. I'm so sorry." My own eyes blurred, but I held myself steady. "You never had to lie, Nina. I would have helped you anyway, but you let them turn me into a criminal in my own story." The room shifted in an instant. Aunt Grace moved closer to me, placing a trembling hand over mine. Uncle Robert glared at my father. Pastor Miller closed his Bible with a snap, his voice ringing through the room. This betrayal goes against everything our community stands for. You have manipulated not just your daughters, but the church itself. For the first time, my parents looked small. Two figures shrinking under the weight of truth they could no longer control. The tribunal they had arranged to shame me had become their trial, and the evidence lay open on every lap, undeniable. The silence in the dining room didn't last long. Once Nina's trembling confession faded, the floodgates opened. Voices rose: indignation, betrayal, disbelief. The people my parents had counted on to reinforce their authority were now turning against them. Elder Peterson, the man who had organized half the fundraisers over the years, slammed his palm on the table. The congregation gave thousands of dollars under the belief it was for Nina's medical care. If what I see here is true, boats, vacations, mortgages, this is fraud against the church. My mother flinched, color draining from her face. My father tried to bluster. It was all for the family's stability. No, Pastor Miller cut in sharply. You exploited faith for personal gain. The church board will begin an audit immediately. If funds were misused, restitution will be demanded. Those words cracked whatever veneer of respectability my parents had left. They shrank in their chairs as relatives shifted away from them. Evelyn seized the moment, sliding another document forward. This is a copy of the forensic examiner's report on the mortgage application signed with Nora's forged signature. That document was used to obtain a second mortgage under false pretenses. The bank is aware, and forgery carries criminal penalties. Gasps swept the room again. Uncle Robert's voice was steel. You put your daughter's name on debt she never agreed to. That's not just immoral, it's illegal. Marcus chimed in, calm but cutting. And less than 40% of Nora's financial contributions ever went to Nina's care. That leaves a clear pattern of misappropriation. I've already spoken with contacts in the insurance sector. Some of these claims will trigger fraud reviews. The words, fraud reviews, seemed to suck the air from the room. My father's shoulders hunched for the first time, as if the weight of real legal consequences was finally dawning on him. I found my voice steadier than I expected. You told me I owed you my future, but the truth is, you owed me honesty. Instead, you used me like a bank account you could drain at will. Evelyn stood commanding the room. Let me be perfectly clear. Nora has no legal obligation to pay for her sister's care. The statute of limitations expired years ago, even if she were at fault, which she was not. The forged mortgage alone is grounds for criminal charges. However, she paused, letting the word hang heavy. My client is willing to consider a civil settlement if immediate steps are taken. All eyes turned to her. What kind of settlement? Pastor Miller asked cautiously. First, repayment of the inheritance taken under false pretenses. Second, transfer of the boat and the Florida timeshare to cover a portion of Nora's financial losses. Third, a signed agreement that Martin and Diane Reed will make no further financial or reputational claims against Nora. Failure to comply will result in a full criminal complaint filed with both the bank and the insurance commission. The attorney my parents had hired shifted uncomfortably. That is a strong demand. Evelyn's gaze was unflinching. It's generous. Criminal charges could carry prison time. My parents exchanged a glance, fear finally visible in their eyes. For years they had thrived on control. Now stripped bare before their community, even their lawyer could offer no shield. Nina's voice wavered but rose above the murmurs. Give her back what you stole. If you care at all about me, about us, you'll stop fighting and make it right. The room went still. For the first time, Nina wasn't silent. She was choosing me over them. Uncle Robert leaned forward. If they refuse, I'll testify to everything I've seen. You won't be alone, Nora. Tears threatened, but I held them back. For once, they weren't tears of guilt. They were the start of vindication. My parents said nothing. They sat small and cornered as Evelyn gathered the folders. The tribunal they had orchestrated had ended, not with my signature on their contract, but with their own signatures about to be forced onto restitution documents. As we left, Marcus whispered to me, "This is just the beginning. The church audit, the insurance investigations, they'll face consequences from every direction. You're free now, but they'll finally feel the weight of the truth. Walking out of that house, I realized justice doesn't always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with signed agreements, lost assets, and the slow crumbling of reputations built on lies. And that for me was enough. The day I carried the last box into Nina's new apartment, sunlight was streaming through the tall, uncovered windows, cutting golden squares across the hardwood floor. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. For the first time in more than a decade, the place we stood in didn't belong to our parents, their rules, or their guilt. It belonged to us. Nina wheeled herself through the wide doorway into the kitchen, her eyes darting around like a child on Christmas morning. The countertops were lowered, the cabinets within reach, the sink open underneath for her chair to slide in. Every detail had been designed for her not as an afterthought, not as a burden, but as proof she could live independently. "Is this really mine?" she whispered. "All yours," I said, setting the box down on the counter. No asking permission, no explaining expenses, no waiting for Dad to approve a new grab bar in the bathroom. "This place is your life, Nina." She ran her hand over the cool countertop and shook her head. "I don't even know what to feel. Happy, terrified, free." "Probably all of the above," I said with a smile that came easier than I expected. The apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small balcony overlooking a community garden. But to us, it was a castle. The first year's rent had been covered by funds properly managed after the guardianship papers were approved. Evelyn had handled the paperwork herself, ensuring every check, every insurance payment, every benefit that was Nina's went directly to her account, not siphoned into someone else's mortgage. As we unpacked the changes, hit me in small waves. Nina stacked dishes into cabinets herself, not waiting for me. She set up her therapy bands by the door. When she moved into the living room, she opened a box labeled plants and placed a tiny succulent on the windowsill. "It feels different," she said softly. "Even putting a plant here feels different. Like it's mine. Not Mom's decoration, not Dad's idea of what looks proper for guests. Just me." I swallowed hard, realizing how much we had both been denied, not just freedom, but the simple dignity of choice. That night, 3 nurses from my unit at Denver Memorial came by with casseroles and takeout boxes. Marcia, our charge nurse, hugged me tightly. "We've started a rotation schedule," she told Nina. "Whenever Nora's in class, one of us can check in. You're part of the family now." Nina's eyes filled with tears as she accepted their embrace. "I never knew people outside of blood could care this much," she admitted. Sometimes, Marcia said kindly, "they care more." 2 weeks later, I sat at my own kitchen table laptop open, filling out enrollment forms for the nurse practitioner program I'd been dreaming about since before the accident. Tuition no longer looked impossible. Without $2,000 siphoned away each month, without parents hovering like creditors, I could finally invest in myself. When I told Nina, she grinned through happy tears. The little sister gets her own apartment and the big sister goes back to school. "Who would have thought I would have," I said quietly, "if they hadn't buried us under lies. For years I'd been so consumed with surviving that I forgot how to imagine." Now when I closed my eyes, I didn't just see night shifts and bills. I saw classrooms, textbooks, professors. I saw myself standing at the head of a ward, not half dead from exhaustion, but leading with confidence. It was more than a career change. It was proof that the future wasn't stolen. It had just been waiting for me to reclaim it. Freedom changed Nina, too. At first, she was hesitant, afraid the silence of her own apartment would remind her of abandonment. But as weeks passed, she grew taller in her chair, her shoulders less curved in apology. She applied for disability benefits, the very ones our parents had told her she'd never qualify for without me. Within weeks, approval letters arrived in her mailbox. "Turns out I've been eligible for a decade," she said with a bitter laugh. She began volunteering at a disability advocacy group downtown. Soon she was helping other families navigate the same systems that had been twisted against us. "I can't change the past," she told me one night over dinner, "but I can make sure no one else loses 11 years the way we did." Watching her wheel confidently into meetings, I realized freedom wasn't just a gift. It was a responsibility she was finally ready to take. 6 months later, I came home from a late shift and drove straight to Nina's apartment. The smell of lasagna wafted from her oven. She'd learned to cook from her chair, mastering recipes she never would have been allowed to try under our parents' roof. As we ate, she asked, "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" I set my fork down. "Not yet. They've offered apologies, but always with strings attached. Forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness, it's surrender. I won't do that anymore." She nodded slowly. I told them the same thing. That reconciliation only starts when they take full responsibility and make amends, not before. For the first time, neither of us felt guilty for setting boundaries. That night in my small apartment near campus, I crawled into bed and slept. Really slept. 8 uninterrupted hours, no dreams of sirens, no guilt-soaked visions of Nina crying in a wheelchair because of me. I woke up with sunlight spilling across my face, and for the first time in 11 years, the weight on my chest was gone. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet of a full night's rest, the peace of knowing you don't owe your life to lies anymore. As autumn leaves turned gold, Nina and I walked or wheeled through the city park, where I used to feed stray cats as a teenager. The feeding station was long gone, but the memory wasn't. "Remember when they said it was your fault because you fed cats instead of walking me?" Nina asked softly. I nodded, eyes misting. That guilt nearly destroyed me. She reached for my hand. But now it gave birth to this 2 sisters, free, finally living our own lives. We stood in the clearing, the crisp air wrapping around us like a new beginning. Freedom had come late, but it had come, and we were determined never to let it go. A year after that so-called family tribunal, my life and Nina's looked nothing like it used to. Sitting on the balcony of my small apartment, watching the spring trees sprout new leaves, I thought about the 11 years I had spent under the weight of false guilt. 11 years of sleepless nights, paychecks drained away, dreams postponed, all because of one carefully constructed lie. And then I remembered a verse Evelyn had once read to me, the verse that had carried me through the darkest days since, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. I had lived like a prisoner in my own family's house, chained by accusations that I had ruined my sister's life. But the truth, when uncovered, snapped those chains. Truth didn't just clear my name, it gave me back my life. After the evidence came out, my parents had nowhere to hide. The church launched a full audit. Bank statements, forged documents, misused donations. Every sheet of paper spoke louder than their excuses. They were forced to liquidate assets, including the fishing boat and the Florida timeshare, to repay a portion of what they had stolen. My mother begged for sympathy, but I kept remembering Proverbs 12:19. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. For 11 years they had seemed untouchable, but the moment truth appeared, their power crumbled overnight. Lies never hold. For me and Nina, life finally started. I enrolled in the nurse practitioner program I had dreamed of years ago. Each class, each late-night study session reminded me I wasn't just working to repay some imaginary debt. I was living for myself, for the future I deserved. Nina changed too. At first she feared living alone, but her new apartment designed for independence gave her strength. She applied for disability benefits, the very ones our parents told her she'd never qualify for without me. Within weeks, she was approved. "Turns out I've been eligible for 10 years, she laughed bitterly. Soon she was volunteering with a disability rights group, helping families navigate the very systems our parents had twisted. One evening she told me, "I can't erase the 11 years I stayed silent, but I can make sure no one else loses their life to manipulation like I did." Watching her wheel into meetings with confidence, I realized freedom isn't given, it's claimed. And Nina was finally claiming hers. 6 months later, I came to her apartment after a long hospital shift. The smell of lasagna filled the air Nina had mastered cooking from her chair. Over dinner, she asked, "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" I set my fork down. "Not yet. They've offered apologies, but always with strings attached. Forgiveness without accountability isn't forgiveness. It's surrender. I won't do that anymore." She nodded. I told them the same thing. Reconciliation starts with full responsibility. Nothing less. We didn't argue. We didn't feel guilty. For the first time, setting boundaries felt like peace, not betrayal. That night, back in my own apartment, I slept, Really slept. 8 uninterrupted hours. No nightmares of bus stops or wheelchairs or whispered accusations. When I woke, sunlight spilled across my face, and for the first time in 11 years, my chest felt light. Freedom doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's the quiet of restful sleep, the peace of knowing you don't owe your life to lies. Looking back, I know my story isn't just mine. Maybe your family never blamed you for an accident, but maybe you've been told you're responsible for someone else's happiness, someone else's bills, someone else's reputation. But real love doesn't demand you destroy yourself to keep others comfortable. My journey is one of those true revenge stories, but not the kind built on bitterness or violence. My revenge was truth. My revenge was freedom. My revenge was reclaiming the years they tried to steal. Justice may have been delayed, but it wasn't denied. And when it came, it didn't only set me free, it gave Nina her life back too. If you're watching this story, I want to ask you, do you believe what John 8:32 promises, that the truth will set you free? If you discovered your family had lied to you for years, would you confront them right away or quietly gather evidence first? And most of all, in your eyes, does justice look like seizing back assets or seeing guilty people face prison time? Drop your answers in the comments. And while you're there, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Because when we share true revenge stories, we don't just pass on drama, we give each other strength. We remind one another that truth always finds a way. The day I walked away from my parents' house for the last time, the wind blew through the trees, and I realized I wasn't that 16-year-old girl anymore, shaking under false blame. I was a woman free at last, free because the truth had surfaced. And as the Bible promises, the truth had set me free.